All right, everybody, it's Friday night, and this is a new episode of Keto Rocks Radio. I'm Jim Hobbs, and to the left or the right is my carnivore co-host, Brian Damaged Forsythe of the band Kix and Rhino Bucket, and we're honored to have a guest with us this evening. Let me just kind of give a little bit of a background of who she is and what she's accomplished. Dr. Joan Ifland holds a PhD, an MBA. She's a fellow of the American College of Nutrition, is CEO of Food Addiction Reset, a program designed to help people gain control of their food. She has over 20 years of experience in the science of nutrition, food addiction, and recovery. She's previously served as CEO of Victory Meals, another nutrition management company. She's a graduate of Stanford University. She specializes in how processed foods impact the body, mind, and emotions, aka spirit. The founder of the Ifland is the author of the textbook Processed Food Addiction, Foundation Assessment and Recovery. Please welcome to the program, Dr. Joan Ifland.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's very kind.
So I guess right out of the gate, Doctor, what caused you to go down this path for your life? What triggered to you to go ahead and start going down this road?
In 1996, I was 44 years old and very sick. And fortunately, I had a yo-yo weight problem. And every time you yo-yo diet, your ability to lose weight in that method decreases. So after doing that for 10 years or so, I got to the point where it just wasn't working. And I was in a group to recover from terrible personalities. It was a 12-step group.
Well, that's a full-time job for sure.
For me, it certainly was. I wanted so desperately to stop yelling, raging. I had 2 little kids, wonderful little girls, a lovely husband, and I would rage at them. My parents raged at me, even as a very small child, which is very traumatizing. I wanted so desperately for it to stop. And I was doing therapy, and I was doing women's groups, and I was doing 12-step groups. And somebody in one of the 12-step groups heard it. I don't know how she figured it out, but she suggested that I try a 12-step group called Food Addicts in Recovery. And I remember when she told me that, I thought, God, I was kind of in a thin phase, and I thought, oh, what would I do? Why would I need that? But by the end of the year, I'd regained the weight, and I said, well, okay, I'll try it. I'll go get the book. The book said, eliminate sugars and flours. Mm-hmm. And that's where I started. Miracles started happening. Like, I've had cravings. I can remember going to kindergarten with cravings. And they stopped after 4 days. Wow. The bloating stopped. The brain fog stopped. The cravings stopped after 4 days, just 4 days of giving up sugars and flours. I was eating a lot of food. I said, there's no way I can lose weight on this. And by the end of the week, I'd lost 2 pounds. And then the allergies stopped, and the sinus headache stopped, and the lifelong sinus infection cleared up. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. But it was in the 3rd week of doing this. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I'm standing in my kitchen, and I just thought, wow, nobody's really messed up in 3 weeks. And I haven't had to yell at anybody in 3 weeks. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my gosh, this has got something to do with the food. Fortunately, I was in yet another 12-step group, and I was able to go to their meeting. I mean, there wasn't an internet where I could just run over and find out. And I said, do people become less irritable on this food plan? And 20 people, yep. And I thought, dang, I've been doing all this therapy and groups and women's healing groups and all this. It was the dang food. So I was hooked. I was hooked right there. And I adopted it as a career. And I started out, over the next 22 years, I tried 14 different ways to get people off of processed foods. and only one of them worked. And for my doctoral internship, I worked with a small faith organization, and they actually got it. They got off the processed foods. They got off their medications. It was an older population. The aches and pains and the signs of aging went away. But I didn't catch the significance of it at the time. So it wasn't until January 2018, I had finished the doctoral program, I'd finished the textbook. I knew it was typically a severe addiction, and I know people were typically traumatized by having had it. And we met Zoom. And when we got a group on Zoom and we got them together for the whole day, boom, they got control of their food. By the end of the day, everybody had had a clean day. And I just I was blown away after 22 years because I tried a lot of different things. Well, it's a severe addiction, so you can't just give people clean food. Like you can't just give an alcoholic water. It's you got to actually put them through a recovery program. You've got to retrain that addicted brain not to respond to cues, for example. So that's how I got hooked on this. It's the impact of sugars and flours, especially is on emotions, is really profound. It makes people violent.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're a fellow of the American College of Nutrition, and yet we talk about this all the time on our show. It's amazing to me that in the places you go to supposedly receive health care, hospitals, doctor's office, but I'm going to strictly stay with hospitals. It's amazing to me that they truly peddle or serve the exact thing that they do not need to heal themselves, which is sugar and carbs. And it's just crazy because it's like that's where people put their trust in to go get healed. And yet it's almost like, talking about addicts and alcoholics, it'd be like welcoming an alcoholic to a meeting so they can rid themselves of their addiction.
Drink.
And it is being held at a bar and drinks are being served all around them on their first day there. Or the person that's supposed to be healing them is giving them the substance of which they're trying to be healed from. So
oh, Jim, it's so bad out there. Once you get the purpose of the medical community, everything becomes clear. The purpose of the medical community is to sell pharmaceuticals. So when you go back to the history of Rockefeller, he was, in oil and gas refining, he had a side product. It was a coal tar that could be used on skin conditions. So he wanted to sell that product. He hired people to write the medical curriculum and then control through all the state legislatures who was able to compete with the medical community. Like they started squashing all the non-pharmaceutical remedies. And it worked tragically well. It's the same thing with dietitians. Dietitians are trained by the processed food industry. 40% of dietitians work for the processed food industry, creating these products that are killing us. So as long as you're clear, I'm going here to create profits for the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm going here to create profits for the processed food industry, then you know what to expect.
Yeah, Brian was sharing what was the source about the tobacco companies buying out all the food companies, Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forget where I heard that exactly, but all the CEOs from the tobacco companies, when they were having trouble in the early 80s, moved over to the food industry and applied their tactics to get people hooked on stuff.
That's exactly what happened. There's a business model, the addiction business model. I call it the 5 A's. This is where my business background comes in. 5 A's of the addiction business model. It's hide addictive substances in the product. So like they hid extra nicotine in the cigarettes. As soon as they got a hold of the processed food industry, they bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in 3 years. The stars aligned They were able to hit all 5 of the addiction tactics, and they just moved in. Within 3 years, they controlled 10% of American spending on food. The tobacco industry. So you hide, and so as soon as they got there, they hired a consultant named Howie Moskowitz to hide sugar, fat, salt to the max in the products before the consumer could detect it. And, you know, bread then had sugar. It wasn't sugar. This was another piece of it. Another of the A's is affordability. And what happened in 1980 is high fructose corn syrup came on the market. And before that, they were beholden. They would have been dependent on their fellow addiction merchants, i.e. the sugar cartel in Florida. So, you know, we're not doing that. We know what those addiction merchants are like. But then high fructose corn syrup came on the market. By then, a lot of small farmers had lost their farms because they invested in equipment to grow more corn. They grew more corn and the price kept falling. They lost their farms, and there were the big agricultural companies, the ConAgras of the world, bought up all those farms. They had way too much corn to sell, way too much wheat to sell. And they persuaded, they plus the sugar industry got the dietary guidelines corrupted. So, you know, the first dietary guidelines were all refined carbohydrates. And we knew even at that time that they had addictive properties. So now you've got the sugar, fat, salt being hidden in the product. You've got affordability taken care of. You are taking out the cigarette vending machines because you're required to, and you're replacing them with snack machines. So now you have another A covered, which is availability. If you want to create an addiction, the person has to be able to get the substance to reinforce the addiction. And it has to be cheap enough that they can buy enough of it to maintain and actually make the addiction progress. And then you've got advertising, that's another A. And all of a sudden you have the US government advertising these highly addictive substances. I mean, rats will choose sugar and saccharin over cocaine and heroin. I'm not making this up. So, yeah, and then the last one is young age.
Yeah, the studies that I've seen is that sugar is 5 times more addictive than heroin.
It's very addictive. So this is Michael Moss's work in the book in the book Hooked, his second book, where he says one of the ways you determine how addictive a substance is how long it takes from the time it's entered your body to the time you're getting the dopamine surge. Mm-hmm. With sugar, fat, salt, it's half a second. It goes from the taste bud to the dopamine circuits in half a second. So this is as opposed to smoking or injecting or drinking, which takes minutes.
Or smoking crack.
Yeah. So yeah, these are highly addictive substances. And then the final A is young age of onset. And you see this in like the Joe Camel cartoon, a cartoon campaign for cigarettes, 10-year-old boys. They were going for 10-year-old boys. At that time, Congress was able to step in and stop that. But once they got a hold of processed foods, oh my gosh, you know,
the Happy Meals.
They could advertise to babies. Mm-hmm. You know, they could put 52% sugar and corn syrup solids into formula.
Oh, so there's creating addicts right out of the womb.
At the moment of conception. If the parents are eating processed foods, the very first DNA replication for that brand new baby will be replicating in an addictive pattern.
Wow. It's crazy.
It is.
That is crazy.
It's
I
crazy,
wonder if that's
crazy,
why
crazy.
babies, I wonder why that's infants when they're crying to be fed all night, because they're addicted and they want that high, they want that feeling of sugar,
You know,
or need that.
even if a baby is breastfeeding, if the mother's eating sugar, the baby will feed longer. So we know the sugar goes into the breast milk.
Wow.
It's very, very bad. It's very bad. But I'm really excited about the carnivore movement, because what carnivore does is it just drastically simplifies the whole withdrawal abstinence issue. I mean, I know that the community doesn't know. I don't think you all are aware that you are putting a really severe, nasty, ugly, destructive addiction into remission when you go on carnivore. But here I am to share about that.
Well, we totally believe in what you're doing and what the information and education that you're trying to share with people around the world. It's also our mission as well. And it's, you know, at least you have the credentials. I mean, Brian's a well-known guitar player, and I'm a nobody. You have the credentials behind your name. So it's nice to have someone like, you know, with you and like Dr. Barry and some of the others who are fighting the uphill battle against the machine. And that's the sad part. It's sad. It truly is sad to me that, you know, the foods that we feed our children through the cafeteria system of the public school system, that the hospitals, and it goes on and on and on. It's just, we're creating addicts and addicts and addicts. And then the problem that has been created by the machine then turns around and solve it by a statin drug. The pharmaceutical then kicks in and say, well, we got a drug for that. We can take care of that for you. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it's Rob Lustig, who wrote the book Metabolical, fantastic book. He puts it this way. He says,
I was just watching a podcast of his last night.
Yeah, he's nailed this. He says all of our health issues today are foodable. They're not druggable. They're foodable. You got to fix the food. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. Like, we don't understand when you go to get your annual physical, or they never ask you, or you're going there because you have some symptoms. They never ask you what foods are you eating, like what has your diet changed. They just want to prescribe you a pill and get you out the door.
That's what they're trained to do. That's what they're trained to do. Well, my daughter was trained to be an MD. Fortunately, she also took her MBA at the same time from University of Michigan. And she did the whole residency and went into practice. And after a couple of years, she said, Mom, I cannot help people in an 8-minute office visit. And fortunately, because she had the MBA, she was able to slide over to consulting. She's not practicing anymore. 1 in 5 doctors wants to quit because they are so frustrated. Their license requires them to prescribe, and they see their patients just getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and that is not what they signed up for. So the training is deceptive. You are not training to provide healthcare services. You are training to prescribe pharmaceuticals and surgery. Let's just get it clear. You want to do something else, you have to go to some other kind of medical professional.
Yeah, it's like whenever profit's involved, it totally corrupts the whole system, and it's obvious, and everything's all intertwined. You know, it's crazy.
The insurance companies and the government and the farmers. It's not the farmers anymore. It's these massive agricultural companies. And yes, profit drives everything. I estimated once, and this is, I have to really qualify this. I just tried putting some numbers down on paper, but I think the processed food industry is 13 times bigger than tobacco. And tobacco was so the Surgeon General in 1964 came out and said that tobacco causes cancer. Had 30 different kinds of studies. As soon as tobacco entered the scene, cancer followed. And it wasn't for 45 years before Congress passed the Family Anti-Smoking Act. And why? Because there were 4 states dependent on growing tobacco. And those 8 senators said, if you want the 8 of us to vote on any of your stuff, you have to oppose the end of subsidies, for example. 45 years.
Wow.
So, and this is 13 times bigger. Every state is growing corn, wheat, dairy, sugar beets. Every state in the union is growing that stuff. And you're not going to find a legislator who will turn against that industry. So we're going to have to do this ourselves. And Jim, I heard you say, I'm a nobody. No, honestly, you're the most important person in the room, because I can sit here and know all this stuff and create the evidence and give them, but you are the one who's getting it to the people who really need it.
Well, that's very kind to you, but we say this all the time, and everybody's life lived out is their message or their testimony. So you do impact people around you just by how you conduct yourself and live your life. And so
I agree with that.
So I do appreciate those words, but I'm just saying overall, like in the world, like my own mother would say, but you're not a doctor. You don't,
okay, but I'm gonna just, if you don't mind, I'm gonna.
No, go ahead.
You're not a doctor, Tim, and yet you have the structure, you have the organization, you have the community to cure. Well, I'm going to be careful here. Put into remission 144 diseases. If I had a choice between going to a doctor and going into your community, I would go into your community and I would be healthier. Do you believe that?
100%. I believe that.
Right.
I see it. I see it every day. I see Brian. Look at Brian. Look how healthy he looks. I mean, the people who are carnivore are very healthy. Look at your skin complexion. It's people don't realize that food is the healing properties that our bodies crave. And when we eat it today, yes.
In this environment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You were talking about doctor office visits, and how their whole motivation is to prescribe pharmaceuticals.
They're training.
Yeah.
Their motivation, the doctor's hearts are in the right place, but they are trained and their license requires them to.
Right. And then Jim mentioned that they never ask you what you eat, but the few times that I've mentioned what I eat, they're horrified.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like completely upside down of what the government recommends for us to eat. So, so I usually don't even bring it up. Not that I go to the doctor either. I haven't been to the doctor in probably 4 or 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I just go have my own labs done, and I'll run it by Dr. Barry on his Zoom meetings.
There you go.
And that's the way I do it.
Yeah, I mean, we want, in our organization, we're working hard right now to create professional outreach for doctors, nurses, therapists to know, because we have an online recovery community. And this is such a severe addiction that if it were drugs, recognizable drugs, they'd be in residential treatment for a couple of years at least. Mm-hmm. And they would be lifelong members of a recovery community. So we're creating that online. And therapists, all those professionals need to know that now there is a place where they can refer people. We call it immersion recovery. And it's very, very specifically designed to protect the brain from processed food cueing, processed food messaging, protect the brain from the messaging. Because once you have the addiction established, that's why the advertising is such a big part of this. Right. Once you have once you've trained the reward center brains to respond with this flood of craving brain chemicals that control behavior. So you're not controlling behavior anymore from your smart frontal lobe. You're controlling it from this very primitive reward system. They can see it now in the MRI, the brain imaging research. The reward center puts out the neurotransmitters. It goes straight over to the behavior center back here in the primitive brain. It never reaches the frontal lobe. You're not making a decision. You're not controlling the behavior. The food industry has trained your reward centers to release that flood and control your behavior without your agreement.
Yeah, I was sharing with Brian one of our past shows, but they understand thought forms repeated will become your thought form. And so the colors trigger those synapses in your brain. For red and yellow triggers I'm hungry. So you see McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, they all use the same colors, red and yellow. Ketchup and mustard triggers I'm hungry. Even if you're not, it's triggering your hey, like we need to get something to eat. So,
yes.
So those institutions and those are in the power to make regulations understand this, and so they do orchestrate it. So you are nothing more than another lab rat that they know that if they can get you over here, you're going to go pick the sugar every single time over life itself, because what you're putting in your system is meant to destroy you.
Yeah, it's very, very bad out there. It's very bad out there. And the between the pharmaceutical and the food industries, they're really financially maintaining most media outlets. So they're not going to cover this. They're not going to describe it. I have to say, if you guys don't mind, I'm really proud of US News and World Report. They have published 3 of my blogs. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you guys mention if I mention that I've gotten a TED Talk?
No,
my
please
first
do.
TED Talk. Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't talk about it until it comes out, in case I get fired. But other people are picking up on this. Yeah, it's very, very bad out there, and it's people like you guys who are going to make all the difference. This will come up from the grassroots. With smoking, it came up through the restaurants. Remember, just battles in restaurants, no smoking zones in restaurants. And then after years, decades, some municipalities got up the nerve to say no smoking indoors anywhere. And that was really helpful because you were de facto, you were forced to at least cut back.
Right.
Because you couldn't smoke at your desk and you couldn't smoke in the doctor's office. But when I was growing
or
up,
a plane.
Well, another thing
Another
thing that did was it caused people to actually see their own behavior, because they couldn't just smoke anywhere. They had to, take the time to go outside, or especially like in the winter when you're out. I used to see people standing outside buildings just freezing, smoking their cigarettes.
Well, and you could no longer cue your fellow your colleagues.
Yeah.
So the queuing went way down. This starts with queuing. It starts with an outside, some kind of message, signal, reminder, stimulation. That is where the craving starts. And then it's not in your control anymore. Addiction, the word addiction comes from a process, I think it was in Roman times, where you could satisfy a debt by selling yourself into slavery. And that process of satisfying a debt by selling yourself into slavery was to addict. So when you are addicted, when you're in an active addiction, you are enslaved to the addiction. And I really want to emphasize that, because the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry are putting out this messaging that if you're overweight or you're not exercising enough or you have a diet related disease, it's your fault.
Right.
They can't, of course, they can't let the blame fall where it should, right on the processed food and pharmaceutical industries. No, they can't do that. So they've done this incredibly good job through media, through the health industry, of blaming the individual and putting out solutions that have to be carried out by the individual. But the system in the brain that is the prize, it's called the mirror neuron system, and it drives conformance. It drives the urge to belong, to fit in. It is the most powerful part of the brain. It will even control heartbeat. Like if you sit down next to somebody and you check in a few minutes, your heartbeats are synchronized. Your mirror neurons did that. If you put women into a dorm, their mirror neurons will synchronize their cycles. It's and the food industry has just totally kidnapped, totally hijacked the mirror neurons. So you're watching TV, you're seeing ads for people watching TV and eating this crap. You see these quote unquote happy families making themselves sick, but they look happy in the fast food ads. So they've just really kidnapped our mirror neuron system. But
So
that's
how do
why
we get it back?
communities are so important. You get into a community, mirror neurons decide who to copy based on who they see the most. So you get a community like this, and they can listen to one podcast after another. After a couple of days, it only takes a couple of days. If you can immerse them in healthy messaging, that person's mirror neurons will swing over and they will find themselves doing healthy things. And it has to be people who are like that person. So for example, our online community is mostly women, and we have just segmented the men's program. So we have all these structures that we know work for women. And we finally said to the men, these structures don't look like they're working for you. Why don't you just go off independently? I mean, we'll do all the infrastructure and the administration, but why don't you think about what you would like to do? Men work differently than women. They do. It's not a question of equality or anything like that. Their brains are literally structured. Men's brains are structured different than women's brains, especially for emotion processing. And now we have a thriving men's community. It's run quite differently from the women. But you can't get men's mirror neurons to engage in a women's group, nor vice versa. It's got to be like-minded people. So this is the secret. This is the secret to getting control. You will copy. Your mirror neurons will not let you away from copying the 5 people you see the most. Those people have to be eating clean. The research on this is really surprisingly strong. Like one guy in the social circle, his social circle research, he said, if your social circle is not losing weight, you cannot lose weight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of people, I just sort of put it out there, what I always post my food and all this stuff. So I get people asking me questions all the time. And like you said, there's a lot of females that they'll ask me for food advice, and I'll try to help them. And they do have, it's different for them. And I have sent a few people your way since I
thank you.
discovered you, because I know that that whole addiction thing. I mean, I went through a whole drug rehab, and I've got alcoholism, so I'm very familiar with addiction and the way it works. And I didn't realize, after I got sober, sugar took over.
Well, this is it, Brian. I don't know. Sometime I know I was doing a bunch of research on addiction transfer,
Yeah.
and it just dawned on me because I've also been in those AA rooms. I mean, I can't do alcohol, and you go in those AA rooms, and even 20 years ago, they were just covered with sugar.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, because of the way processed foods are now formulated with these very high levels of mostly high fructose corn syrup, which Rob Lustig has published on this, moves through the body like corn alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
The high levels of sugar, fat, salt, there is no longer drug and alcohol addiction recovery in the US. It's all drug and alcohol addiction transfer
Yes.
to processed foods.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that I stumbled onto the whole keto
Yes.
carnivore community, and it, as soon as I did that, I saw what was going on, and now it's like my personal experience with food. It's between changing my diet, and then I incorporated the intermittent fasting with it, and the intermittent fasting tool was like that helped point out that emotional factor, like when I would start craving in the late evening for something. And before I started the keto thing, it was I was craving carbs and sugar.
Yeah.
So once I started the intermittent fasting thing, I would still have those cravings, and I even caught myself a couple of times walking into the kitchen at that same time at night, and then because I was in fasting mode, I wouldn't engage with it, but I would think, I'd go, why am I, like, I would look at myself and I go, I'm not hungry. Why am I in here?
Because
So
you
it
have an
showed me,
addiction craving, it's not
right.
hunger. Yeah.
And it was an emotional thing. It wasn't a
Mhm.
hunger thing. It was an emotional thing. So
Mhm.
all those little things that I stumbled upon on my journey, it just gave me more clarity to what was going on. And then I realized how similar the food thing is to my drug and alcohol addiction.
Yep.
It's all the same
Smart.
thing.
That was really smart. Really smart. Yeah, I am just so glad you're talking about this. My heart breaks for drug and alcohol addicted people who are told that they're better off with processed food addiction, and that is not true.
No,
No,
it's just a slower death.
it's painful because with drug and alcohol addiction, you can get treatment. You can get somebody to say, we're going to help you get off the alcohol. But if you have processed food addiction and you go to a therapist, they're going to say, well, I'm going to teach you how to use that in moderation. Or you go to an eating disorder specialist. No, don't try to get that up. It's very, very bad out there. But we're clear. We're super, super clear. This is a substance use disorder. There's no such thing as an eating disorder. Just like you wouldn't say to a cocaine addicted person, oh, you have a snorting disorder. No, and then smokers don't have an inhaling disorder. Eating is nothing more than the method by which these drugs get into our system.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've heard other people say it, like when they're headed into like a rehab, and and they're not familiar with what goes on, for alcohol. They think they're going in to learn how to like drink like a gentleman,
The delusion. Yeah.
and which
Yeah.
is, that would never work. You can't do
No,
that.
it's so clear. But that's the huge advantage of the carnivore food plan, is that, even keto, I was shocked when I learned that keto, you have your 50 grams of carbs that you're allowed per day, that the people who are helping, the practitioners, they're allowing refined carbohydrates in that 50 grams, which means that they're maintaining the addiction. I'm working on a paper preventing, I don't know how am I going to put this, safe keto. where you ask, you only have to ask 6 to 11 questions of somebody to find out if they're experiencing the signs of addiction to processed foods. If you have a person who's addicted to processed foods, the last thing you want to do is tell them, and you can eat all the fat you want. Fat's addictive. So they will transfer the carb addiction to fat addiction, but the carb cravings are incubating. We have incredibly good research for incubation of sucrose cravings. And so after a while, and the high that you get from fat is very different from the high you get from sugar. The high you get from fat is very mellow. It's kind of more sedating. The high you get from sugar is excitatory. It's a true high. And so I think what happens is they're on the fat and then they miss the sugar. The sugar cravings are incubating until finally they break through and they have some kind of carb. And now they really can't stop, but they want to continue the keto. So they keep eating good high volumes of fat. Like I've had people tell me, well, I do keto Monday through Friday, and then I just lose it over the weekend. Or I do keto every other week and I'm binging in the off weeks. That is the re-eruption of the carbohydrate addiction. And now the person is on the absolute total worst possible food plan ever, which is high levels of fat and high levels of sugar. Those are combining to fill cells with trash, glycated end products and oxidative stress. Yeah. So now your cells are really actively dying.
It's funny what you have brought up and discussed, because I've had a couple of friends over the years, and not that I would recommend this, so I don't, but they went with the gastric balloon. They were dealing with diabetes, they were obesity, and it's what you're discussing. They make them go through therapy to make sure that they're not going to be turning food addiction into alcoholic or drug addiction to feed themselves, because the studies show that people who get a gastro bypass or a gastric balloon turn to alcohol to get their sugar, and they become alcoholics. And so they put you through that program, and I've seen it, and I'm blown away by them exchanging one addiction to another, but not solving the addiction. The addiction is to break the addiction to the substance, whatever that substance may be. Not to put a rubber band around your stomach.
No, it's very, very, now this person who's already laboring under a severe addiction now has this severe medical problem. Their stomachs don't work anymore. They need nutrients, and that stomach can't absorb nutrients anymore. It's so bad out there. Yeah, this situation that you're describing gave us really good evidence for addiction transfer. And the sad thing is that therapy, so I want to credit another practitioner, Bitten Janssen, with this idea. She just gave it to me in a panel a couple of weeks ago. An addicted brain is a hurting brain. It's the stress pathways are hyperactivated because they're trying to compensate for all this euphoria happening. They're stressed. The addicted pathways are downregulated. They wear out. Your ability to feel pleasure and satisfaction just goes down, down, down. Your frontal lobe's not working. This is a really fragile, hurting brain. And so you go to a therapist, and what does that therapist do? Now, if you were on alcohol, that therapist would not start working with you until you were off the alcohol, because they know this. They know what I'm describing. But when you go to a therapist and it's something like, okay, I got to go through therapy to get this weight loss surgery, they take this fragile, hurting, painful brain, and then they stress it out with therapy. I mean, I've had people say, yeah, I'm going, I can remember heading towards the therapist office, and I would be planning the bakeries and the ice cream places I was going to hit after the therapy section.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because we've been programmed from a young age, whether it's from the media or from our parents or from our place of employment, that we reward accomplishments with food and drink.
Or
We
television.
celebrate.
Oh.
Yep, we celebrate with food and drink. We watch it on TV. What do? We gather around. We celebrate with food and drink. Get a promotion. We go out to celebrate with food and drink.
Yeah.
And
it's not going to be healthy food.
nope.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not. And the people who comes to my mind in regards to the gastro bypass, you're right. I've seen, because then other issues start to creep up on them. They start to deal with, and they just don't. I have no energy. I got a good friend of mine. He's like, I just don't have any more energy, Jim. I have none. And he keeps going back to the doctors, but they're not going to tell them, well, the reason I don't have energy is because you're not be able to process nutrients, and the stuff you are putting in your system is the still like the energy drinks, all that stuff that's just high fructose corn syrup and caffeine. It's not good for their body, but yet you can't tell them that. So
you can, the moment an addicted person who's had weight loss surgery realizes they can still eat as much ice cream as they want, is a dead person. This is like saying to a smoker, oh, we're just going to do some surgery on that trachea, that windpipe. We're going to make that windpipe smaller, and then you won't be able to get as much smoke, and then you'll be okay.
That's a great analogy. The madness, yes, absolutely. The craziness that we fall prey to because we don't do enough of going out there and researching ourselves with other sources outside of the traditional of what you're being taught. You have to go out there and then just be honest. If you're out there and you're watching this program, try to be a carnivore just for 3 or 4 days and be honest with yourself. Do you feel better? But you'll notice differences right away, just like you did, Dr. Ifland. You notice differences right away, and Brian did too. So did I. You'll start to notice. Yeah.
People will say that the addiction merchants will say, oh, people can't do that because they want immediate gratification. 4 days to make cravings stop, that's immediate gratification. You don't get anything more immediate. It's everything that comes out of media, because I've looked at this over time. Everything that comes out of media is not true. When it comes to food, it's not true.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Because if they were telling the truth, the advertisers would bolt.
All right, it's that time of the evening where we get a chance to check in with Mr. Brian Schenker of the Meat Tribe channel for those meat deals of the week, and hopefully he's going to give us some great scores this week. So Brian, what do you have?
All right, guys, good to see you all. So we've got a couple of deals with Food Lion. They are running through the 12th. They've got a choice grade boneless New York strip for $7.99 per pound, and then all of their Nature's Promise meat and seafood is on sale 25% off. Aldi's been holding out for a few weeks. They finally got a good deal going that runs through the 12th. They've got some choice grade bone-in ribeye roasts for $7.99 per pound. Are you running over there today, Jim, to get those?
No, that's not exciting me too much, but keep
No?
going. Nope, I'm holding off for a better one.
Okay, well, Harris Teeter has let you down. They don't have their
Ooh.
ribeyes on sale this week, but they do have their porterhouse and T-bone steaks on sale. So for the value pack, rancher grade, it's $6.99 per pound. The small pack is $7.49 per pound, and the choice grade is $7.99 per pound. But they do have some short ribs on sale. So they've got their choice grade bone-in short ribs on sale for $5.99 per pound, or they also have some choice grade boneless beef short ribs on sale for $7.99 per pound. And then the last two items at Harris Teeter, they've got a brisket roast for $6.99 per pound and a brisket flat for $6.99 per pound. So
Wow.
no ribeyes at Harris Teeter, but I think those short ribs and briskets might be enticing to you now.
No. You got my attention. I'll be heading to Harris Teeter for that.
All right, and then Brian down at Kroger, their deals run through the 12th. They've got some beef brisket with a digital $1.20 digital coupon. It's $2.77 per pound, and they're limiting you to 5. You got room for 5?
Man, my freezer's stuffed with briskets right now.
All
I
right,
just
well,
keep buying them.
somebody else can take advantage. So $2.77 after a $1.20 digital coupon, limit 5. And then they also have some ribeye steaks in a family pack, a little bit more expensive than I like, but $12.99 per pound. And then the last deal, Giant Eagle has some 80% lean ground beef value packs on sale for $2.99 per pound. So if you have a Giant Eagle and you've been waiting for ground beef to go on sale, you're going to have to head over to Giant Eagle, $2.99 per pound.
What was the breakdown on that? 80, was it what you
80,
say?
Yeah, 80% lean ground beef.
80-20. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
No.
So the only other thing, those are all the deals I have, but I did smoke my first whole chicken this past weekend.
All right.
And I'm going to mark it up as a success, even though it didn't have a lot of smoke flavor and the seasoning wasn't quite throughout all the meat. But I've got some ideas of how to tweak it. You know, when you do a whole chicken, it doesn't take as long as, you know, as cooking something else. You're cooking, at least the videos that I was watching, you're cooking it at 350. You know, it only took a couple of hours, but it turned out kind of juicy and still pretty good. The skin crisped up a little bit, so it was pretty good.
That's probably why you didn't get a lot of smoke flavor, you know, because this having skin on it. You know, when you smoke beef or something, it doesn't have skin on it.
Yeah, and the short period. It was only 2 hours, so I might cook it at a lower temperature for longer next time. Season it up more, put some butter, I don't know. I'm gonna play around with it, but it was good. I've only got a tiny sliver of breast left for today for lunch, so I'm happy.
Well, congratulations on your first foul with your smoker. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in with us and giving us those deals. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. And hopefully the ribeyes will make it back on the specials.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Take care, Brian. We'll see you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Right. So people watching this program tonight, if they wanted to reach out to you or read some of your books or join your community, what's some of your websites? What's some of the books they could purchase to be able to learn more about what you're, you know, the knowledge that you're sharing?
Thank you so much for asking about that. Our hub website is processedfoodaddiction.com.
Okay.
The textbook, which is available on Amazon, don't freak out when you see that it's $40. Textbooks usually run $200 to $400. I fought to the publisher to get this down. It's readable. It's slow. It's built on 2,000 studies. And people say, how could there be that much research on processed food addiction? It's because the obesity and eating disorders researchers and the drug and alcohol addiction researchers are creating evidence, but they don't know that it's evidence. Like if they create evidence for cravings, cravings are a sign of an addiction. Cravings are not normal. You see the industry now, the addiction has progressed. It gets worse over time. So we've now been grappling with it for close to 40 years. They're trying to normalize aspects of the addiction. It's normal to have an addiction. No, it's not. It's hell to have an addiction. It's normal to have cravings. No, it's not. Your brain should be your own. Your brain shouldn't be thinking about products because you've been addicted by a corporation. Yeah, so processedfoodaddiction.com is a good place to start. If you are ready to join the community, go to foodaddictionreset.com. You can get there from Processed Food Addiction, but if you just like, okay, I need to get into this online support community, I need to get my conformance drive engaged with healthy people, go to foodaddictionreset.com. And there's a self-quiz. We put the self-quiz everywhere. These are the diagnostic criteria for alcoholism, but we've reworded them for eating, for food. I validated that approach as my doctoral dissertation. So what does that mean? It means that people who are chronically eating processed foods are showing up with the same behaviors as somebody with alcoholism.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the kind of evidence that will persuade a practitioner. And there's a whole chapter on each one of those. Now there are 11 behaviors in the diagnostic manual for alcoholism. And I wrote a full chapter on the evidence that that behavior was showing up in overeating. That alcoholism behavior. Now, this is the American Psychiatric Association. They've been working on these criteria for 50 years. It's the gold standard in the US for diagnosing alcoholism. Those very behaviors are showing up in overeating. And it is, so you can go to either processedfoodaddiction.com or Food Addiction Reset and take the self quiz, and you'll see for yourself. And I just finished a workshop on prevalence. Like, does everybody have this? And if you look, 83% of the United States now is overweight, obese, or severely obese. 83% overweight, obese, or severely obese. And you can find 6 signs of addiction in that obese population. So the researchers will say, yes, this obese population has cravings. Yes, they have failure to cut back. Yes, they have unintended use. Yes, they have relationship problems. Yes, they have use for reasons other than hunger. Those, and if you have 6 out of the 11, that's the cutoff for a severe addiction. Mm-hmm. So you have 83%. There's evidence. Let's just say there's evidence, good evidence, that 83% of Americans are walking around with a severe addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the big message here is just, this is not your fault. Nobody ever called you up and said, hey, would you like a severe addiction? You're going to have lots of diet-related diseases and you're going to hurt all the time. Nobody ever called anybody up and to get their permission to do this to our brains, which is now cascading out to, and this Nancy Appleton has a website where she lists the research connecting processed foods to diseases. And she's got 144 diseases on her list. Wow. I will say in the 26 years I've been doing this, I have, unless it's been surgically removed or it just doesn't exist anymore, you've lost it in an accident, the hard wiring is still there. You take this burden of disease off the person, you take the source of the disease away from the person, their body's just like, oh, good, now we'll fix everything, and off they go. And I have seen, as I said, unless you don't have it anymore, like if you don't have your thyroid or you don't have your cartilage, it will start working again, including your brain.
It's so sad. It's so sad to see people who have been diagnosed as pre-diabetic or type 1 or type 2 say, well, there's no cure out there other than doing the insulin or the insulin. And yet studies after studies show that food can reverse diabetes, and full they just remission. Don't believe. Yeah, full remission. Mm-hmm. And they still will go to a doctor and prefer to go get that insulin.
No, they don't. I just want to. They're not choosing that.
Yeah,
that is
they're
not
programmed.
Your fault.
They're programmed to do that.
Yes,
that's a response. That's a response to the programming.
The doctor has been trained. The doctor has now been advertised as an authority figure. They're told that if their blood work numbers are within a certain range, then the medication will keep it there, that they're okay, which is not true. Mm-hmm. And nobody is telling them the truth except you guys. This is why you're so important.
Well, we appreciate that. And I just looked up at the clock and I saw that we kept you for the hour in which we said we wanted to keep you. So we appreciate you allowing us to hold you hostage and captive for this hour.
I'm glad to be here.
It's been truly
a happy hostage. I am.
Yes. Well, I tell you, I know Brian, I could probably sit here all day and just and take the pearls of wisdom with your dropping, and we would just be picking them up and stay with you the whole day. So hopefully we can have you back at another time as well.
Yes, please do have me back. We didn't get to talk a lot about mental health.
So can we talk about that next time? Can we do
Yes,
that?
sir.
Let's schedule another time with you and bring you back. Because I know, Brian, you okay with her coming back?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, this is an endless subject for me. I could talk about this all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to get the word out. We got to live it out. So we appreciate you coming on the show. And right before we sign off here, I always ask Brian one question for people who've watched the show this whole time. What bit of advice would Brian give somebody to improve their health and to maximize their immune system? What would that be, Brian?
I would say eat your meat.
And I would second that. Well, thanks so much. We look forward to seeing you guys next Friday. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and stay out of those hospitals. We'll see you, everybody.
Nice meeting you.
That's just, thank you for having me.